So the first thing we have to do is check our sprues for missing parts or defects. Everything here appears to be in order. My name's Marcel and this is Snakeworks. Alright then, so it's now the time to build the most numerous unit from the Leviathan boxed set, the Termagants. There's 20 of the little swines in here to build, so let's get cracking, shall we? Using my Tamiya plastic cutters, I first begin by cutting the parts I need off the sprue. The plastic cutters I use are by Tamiya, and they are bloody fantastic. You can see here the parts for step 1 of the build. I like to build things in the order the instructions say. I like order, you see. Also, you will see there's 2 of each of the same miniature there. That's because in the set of 20 there are 2 of each pose, so I shall be doing them in duos. To keep things organised, I've made this little numbered sheet to keep all the parts together that belong, well, together. This saves me having no idea which leg goes on which body later on. You could just build them one by one to prevent this issue, but I like to do things in a factory line style. I actually stole this idea from an old movie called A Tale of a Tiger, where a kid and an old geezer build a tiger moth together.
Pretty good, huh?
Not bad. That's the easy part.
Now sometimes I like to do things factory line style. It usually just depends on my mood at the time. Factory line is far more efficient though, although possibly more boring at times. We have to clean the parts up next, and to do that I'm using my good friend Andy the knife. I still haven't gotten around to buying a proper hobby knife, so if you could do me a favour and drop a comment saying "get a proper hobby knife you idiot," that might spur me along. Using Andy the knife, I then cut any nubs, sprue attachment points or mould lines off the miniature. As these are a new kit, I don't have many issues to clean up. Older kits tend to have proper nasty mould lines, these don't, so I'm happy. Now all the parts for phase 1 of the build are ready to assemble. These Termagants are actually push fit, which means they have holes in that you insert their little shafts into. I actually find the shafts are a little too girthy, as the holes seem a little on the tight side. To sort that out, we shall do some chamfering. You can see here a chamfered shaft I just made Blue Peter style. This gives the shaft a pointed tip, which is 100 times easier to insert into the Termagant's hull. Technically you don't have to glue them, but as I don't intend on pulling them to bits later, I will be. What do you guys think about push fit kits? Do you think they're a good idea or not? What is the actual point of them? Is it so you don't need glue? Is it supposed to be easier to build? Please someone let me know in the comments below. So here's my glues of choice. Tamiya cement and Tamiya extra thin cement. One of them is a normal gloopy consistency and the other thin one is thin. They both have their uses, which I shall get to in a momento. I thoroughly recommend Tamiya cements. Of all the ones I've tried, which is a lot, these are by far the best. So we now need to glue those Termagant parts together. For the main assembly here, I used the normal Tamiya cement. I can put some on the shaft and some on the hull. The cement also acts as a sort of lube to help insert the shaft, only while it's wet though, as it sets rather fast. For the final finishing touch, I then wick in some of the extra thin cement. it works fantastically. If you want to see what I mean and get some of that fantastic Tamiya glue for yourself, then check out the little link up here somewhere. I'll also chuck one down in the description below. The description, yes, not the description, the description. After all those first stages are all assembled, you have this. 20 little Termagant bodies, all still in their little numbered boxes. Are they living in a box? Is it a cardboard box? Am I living in a box? Am I living in a cardboard box? Am I living in a box? Now some of you might have noticed that I'm a bit of a big fan of 80s music. I do actually like 90s music too. And anything before the 80s. Basically I don't like any of the modern stuff. I say I don't like, there's a few things I do like, but most of the stuff on the radios these days is a bit terrible. I know that might come as a bit of a shock to some of you, as I'm such a trendy personality. So the next parts to remove are the guns, which look like some sort of Ann Summers product to me. Oh, and some skinny little arms. Now try to be careful when you remove these bits from the sprue, as they are very fiddly and they're prone to breaking easily. They're a little swine to fix if they snap, so just take your time. Again, I put the parts in the boxes with their designated body bits. Doing this makes me feel super organised, which makes a change as I'm not really. I do like to make a lot of lists though. Does that count? After gluing all those bits on, we're basically done with the boys. We now have a big pile of Termagants and we can be free of our organisation sheet too. Well, I hope so. Hopefully I haven't missed any parts out. So it turns out I hadn't missed any parts, so we can move along. I don't even need Obi-Wan to motivate me.
Move along. Move along. No.
So it's bases next. We need 20 28mm bases. It's a good thing I checked, as I was adamant I needed 25mm bases, and you don't get enough of those in the box. I don't even know what they are for. I better not have cocked up somewhere. Anyway, here's 20 28mm bases for your viewing pleasure. Again, the Termagants have shafts to insert into the holes on the bases. This time though, they're hexagons. I'm not sure why that is, but I assume it's so you orient them in the right direction. Again, I chamfered my shafts for ease of insertion. To seal my shafts in the hole, and to make sure these Termagants didn't one day start falling off the bases, I again glued them on. This time I wicked in some super thin cement to both the opening on the rear, or bottom, whatever you want to call it, and also the base where the Termagant touches it. They better not fall off now. Oh. Now the last thing I would want is for them to pull up. I don't know why it's so funny. It's for them to pull up off the bases with half of the basic material attached to their feet still. I forgot to sort out this bloody squeaky chair. Anyway, imagine the damage and mess that would cause. I really do recommend gluing them at this stage. Also, why wouldn't you glue them? Can anyone think of a reason you wouldn't? Laziness? Lack of glue perhaps? They're the only reasons I can think of. Why would anyone want to be able to pull them off the base unless it's for some sort of storage issue? I don't know. With all the Termagants now securely stuck down to their bases, I hope, we have this. A big bunch of 20 Termagants. Do they come in squads of 10 or 20? I still haven't read the rules, you know. Let's move on to their little buddies. So there are also these little things on the sprues. They are known as rippers. Be careful when removing them from the sprue, as they look a little fragile. A bit like me after a few shandies. And I fancy a shandy now. Here are all the rippers you get in the box. There's 2 pairs of 2. If my maths is solid, or just math to you Americans, that makes 4. Now, speaking of Americans, yes you, the YouTube analytics tells me that most of my viewers are actually from America. So, good morning America, or good evening if you're watching in the evening. Oh, there's the afternoon as well, isn't there? Speaking of Good Morning America, it reminds me of that old movie by, it's not by Robbie Williams? God no, that would be terrible, wouldn't it? The war movie with Robin Williams, what's it called? Good Morning Vietnam.
Good morning, Vietnam!
I've never actually seen it, you know. Is it any good? Robbie Williams. Can't stand Robbie Williams. So you have to glue the little rippers together in pairs. I did actually have to consult the instructions here to make sure I got the pairs correct. You might get away with mixing and matching, but I wasn't in the mood to be dealing with any cock-ups this weekend. The bases for the Ripper swarms, and I use the term swarm lightly, are these 40mm jobs. The same ones we use for Terminators and things. There's a strange shiny patch on the bottom of mine, and I don't know why. You can sort of see it on the top too. It has no impact on how we assemble these whatsoever, but I just thought it was interesting. Again, to get these rippers on the base, there's a shaft and hull combination. We followed the same steps before of chamfering the shafts to get them in the hulls easier. Also, has anyone ever noticed that rippers look a lot like the chest bursters from Alien? That chest burster literally said hello when you reverse the clip. Now, I never actually knew if it was called a chest burster or a chest buster. Both seem equally right. Do any of you guys know the correct term? Now, Alien is a very, very good movie, in my opinion. But it's been on TV so much lately, Mrs. Snakeworks is starting to find it annoying. I think she's missing out. I'll watch it at any opportunity. The other night, I also shared with her that when I was a youngster, I couldn't actually sit through the entire Alien movie as I just found it too damn scary. She said I was pathetic, but I'm still convinced it was a scary movie for a youngster. I must have been about, 10 or 11 at the time? It gave me nightmares, you know. Anyway, let's get these bases done now, shall we? For basing, I have my pot of grit from around the globe. It's a mix of different grain sizes. It was also free, as it was mostly dug up from my parents' driveway. So like I always say, it's probably full of bits of dried up dog shit and old bones. They add to the naturalistic texture. This week, while waiting for glues and things to dry, I have been watching Olden Demon on YouTube. There's a lot of fun Oldhammer content on there. I recommend going to have a look. There's a link up at the top now and one in the description below.
If you are scrolling on Instagram, you will find some classic models such as Chainsaw Wizard, Brother Craig Whispering Deep Magazine, Half-Dressed Berserker, and Calgar on Toilet. In fact, I Got Painted a Thing was disqualified from Olden Demon as the model from outside of Games Workshop's IP.
To affix the grit, we need a glue, and this is the glue I like, PVA glue. Now, not all PVA glues are created equal, so make sure you get a good one. This one is rated for exterior use, so it must be good. Once I had a PVA glue that melted when it got wet. Useless. I then squeeze some PVA glue out onto a palette. I like to use my dry brushing palette as it adds to the texture for when I'm dry brushing. That's double duties right there, folks. I do actually have a dry brush palette video on the way. It's a much better version than just the upside down placemat. It will be out soon, but I'm still in the collating phase at the moment. So don't expect it anytime soon, unless you're watching this 2 years after it was released, which means it might be imminent. To make the glue a little more pliable, I mix a touch of water in. Out of the pot, and especially in this heat, the glue's just too thick to work with. A little water goes a long way, so be careful you don't over thin it, although just add more glue if you do. We then paint that mixture onto the base of the miniatures, in this case the Termagant, but I've also done the Ripper swarms too. They should be called Ripper duos really. While the glue is still wet, quickly give them a dunking in the grit mix. This reminds me of old school art lessons at Christmas time when you put glitter on everything. Some people actually put glitter on their miniatures, you know.
I'm not gonna lie, it's obviously a little bit different, but it's an absolutely nuts colour scheme.
After the miniature has had its dunking, just check its rim for any muck. Sometimes you get a little drip or spill around the rim and it doesn't look great. If you do get any around your rim, just smear it off with your finger. Easy. And with all those Termagants and Rippers gritted up, you have this. They are almost complete, but there's still a couple of steps to do as yet. Important steps too, you know. Now some people like to superglue their basing grit to their miniatures' bases. I really don't advise using superglue unless you're under some sort of time constraint. It can cause a real mess if you cock up somewhere, as it's 100 times harder to clean up. If you do make a mess with the old PVA mix, it's still wet, so you can just poke bits off. Superglue and grit dries in the blink of an eye, so it doesn't give you any working time. For my next trick, we need a container of the waterproof variety. A paper one won't work. A container with a screw-on lid is ideal. A jam jar is both waterproof and has a screw-on lid, so that's perfect. Also put some water in it. This one actually belongs to Snakeworks' mother-in-law, and she's not going to be happy she's not getting it back. Oh dear. Anyway. Next up, we dispense some PVA glue into the jar with the water. You need quite a lot of glue, as it thins it down very easily. Weirdly, the way it stays together underwater reminds me of that scene in Ghostbusters 2, where the bath tries to eat the baby. As if that's another Ghostbusters reference. Anyway, using an old brush or something, give it a damn good mix. You can see here, my mix is still a bit thin, so I'm going to go in and add some more PVA glue to it. Here we have the correct mixture ratio. You can test it by painting the sides of the inside of the jar. It's leaving a bit of a trail behind, like a snail or a slug does. Interesting fact, when I was a kid, I loved snails. Nowadays, not so much. Slugs always sucked though. Oh, something bit me on the forehead. I think it's pretty normal for a young lad to be interested in insects and animals and stuff. I grew up on a farm, so there was a lot of stuff going down for me to have a good look at. However, being an 8-year-old watching Shire horses being bred was a bit of an eye-opener. Once we legit tried to make a parachute out of bin bags and jumped off a huge stack of hay bales. I still don't know how we survived that. It must have worked. Alright then, so using an old pipette, I actually got mine from the range, we then splash a few drops onto the bases to seal that grit in. Someone once said you can add dish soap to make the dispersal better, but I didn't try that today. Maybe next time. Also, you can use a brush to gently tease the mixture to anywhere it's missed. Don't be rough though, or you might pull it off. When that's all applied, you have this. The base now looks like a soggy biscuit, doesn't it? A bit like a hobnob that's been dunked in your tea. I wouldn't recommend eating it though. Now we wait for it to dry. I normally just leave them overnight. You can use a hairdryer, but I find that can blow the mixture off and makes a bit of a mess of the rim, and nobody wants that. What I do like to do is put them all on a drying rack of sorts. I just use my dry brush palette, as any rim runoff will add to the texture. Don't put them down on a nice tidy surface, as sometimes they do like to stick to it if there's any little rim spillages anywhere. It's also good to just move them around after about 30 minutes or so, just in case they're starting to stick. I'm sure you'll be fine with that though, it's very easy moving things. While I put my equipment away, I just wanted to give a shout out to all my patrons and channel members. Dan Yallop, Lee Blackley, Donald, Pine Tree, Bobzilla, Charles Marlowe, Andrew Marrington and Dr. Lee. Thank you all so very much. Now before I show you the finished article, I just wanted to show you this. This is my pot of paintbrushes that I use the most, and it's not just a pot, is it? It's a Nescafe mug. Interestingly, if you turn the Nescafe mug around, it says, "If you're enjoying this video, then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel." That means you, Darren. If you are enjoying the channel, then please consider joining us on Patreon, the link to which is in the description below, or up here somewhere. Alright then, let's check out the finished article, shall we? So here we are, a big bunch of little Termagants. There's 20 Termagants there, all of them from the wonderful new Leviathan boxed set. You can also spot a couple of bases of Ripper Swarms there too. Again, I feel swarm isn't really the right word. So the plan with these is to get them painted, and I do have something quite interesting lined up in that regard. There may have been some clues in previous videos, so let me know if you think that you know.
Pretty good, huh?
Not bad. That's the easy part.
They should be fun to paint. If you want to see some more videos in this Tyranid building series log thing, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.